So please welcome Tom Torres.
To the environmental review process scoping meeting. This is the second of 4 planned scoping meetings for the environmental review process related to the Resolution Copper Mine project. And I appreciate all of you taking the time to be here. We're here to share information with you. We're here to answer any questions you may have, and we're also here as part of the scoping process to take any comments that you may want to provide. Again, let me introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. Again, I'm Tom Torres. I'm the Deputy Forest Supervisor on the Toronto National Forest. I work for a guy named Neil Bosworth. Neil is the Forest Supervisor, and as such, he has the authority to make decisions related to any decisions that will come out of the environmental impact statement. And when I say environmental impact statement, that is the official term for the environmental review process that we are currently working through. And so, as we move through the process of the EIS, you'll often see me in Neil's stead, and you'll oftentimes see Neil himself. Neil had a pressing family matter tonight and couldn't join us, but he certainly wanted to. Before I go any further, I want to introduce a couple other folks. There's a lot of Forest Service folks here with us tonight. They're either experts in various fields of their study, and there's also some leaders of the Forest Service here, and I want to introduce some of our district rangers. So back here in the corner, that's Gary Hanna. He's a district ranger for the Mesa Ranger District, and his district boundaries include the proposed tailings area over near Queen Valley. Also over here we have Kelly Jardine. He's a district ranger for Tonto Basin over near Roosevelt Lake area. And I want to introduce a ranger named Mark Sando. Mark Sando is the district ranger, brand new. If you can believe this is day 1 for Mark. Mark Sando is the district ranger for the Globe District Office, and that includes the Oak Flat area and the proposed land exchange and mining area. So Mark, welcome.
Thank you.
One more person I want to introduce real quick is Mark Nelson. Mark Nelson is an employee of the Tonto National Forest, and he serves as the project manager for Resolution Copper, not only the EIS, but for other aspects of the project as well, including the baseline data gathering effort for various information and all other aspects of the project. So Mark works directly for Neil and myself, and Mark's going to lead us through a presentation of what we know about the project, and we'll be available during the Q&A section to answer any questions. So why are we here? Number one, we're here to share what we know about the project as proposed by Resolution Copper. I think, 2 years ago or something like that, Resolution Copper presented us with the proposed general plan of operations that proposed the various aspects of this very large project. We have a model back here in the back of the room that has been provided to us by the concerned citizens and retired miners. And they shared this model with us maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we said, yeah, it seems to represent what is described in the general plan of operations at full build-out at 40 years of mining. So thank you all for sharing that information. We're here to discuss the EIS process. We're here to also talk about how you guys can have a voice in that process at what particular times. You can have input into what we're considering as we move through the process. But most of all, we're here to listen to your concerns and issues. And Mark's going to talk in much greater detail about what some of those issues might be that we've already thought of. And primarily we're in listening mode. So when we get to the Q&A and the comment section, That's what we're here to do is listen. Before I turn it over to Mark and we start the formal presentation part, I want to acknowledge that this project, this proposal, is heavy with controversy. We're aware of that. The controversy comes from a variety of things. Specific legislation requirements for a land exchange as required by the National Defense Authorization Act that was passed in December of 2014. We're aware of significant the formal identification of about 5,000 acres or so around the Oak Flat area as a traditional cultural property. And we're aware of our responsibility to consider that during the EIS process. We're aware of the significant potential economic benefits to the project, to the local economies, the state economy, the regional economy, maybe even the nation's economy. We're also aware of potential conflicts with the forest travel management decision or pending travel management decision. And finally, but certainly not least, we're aware of the potential for significant environmental effects. Potential effects to air, water, wildlife, cultural resources, etc. And so it's with that I'm going to turn it over to Mark, and he's going to share with you what...
We really appreciate your interest. We really appreciate your engagement in the process. One more slide. I'm going to try and follow up on Tom's comments and provide a bit more detail about the project for you. As you know, this is a big proposal, and there's no way we can cover everything in a half hour, but I'm going to try and hit the main points, and then hopefully talk a little bit about some things that will help facilitate our conversation as we move forward tonight. I'm going to discuss briefly the EIS process. We'll talk about the land exchange, the proposed mine. And then I really want to spend some time talking about issues, and I'll explain what issues, the term issues means to us as the Forest Service and how that fits into the EIS process. I'd like to take a minute to introduce some of my colleagues here that I brought to answer the really difficult questions. We have Raul Sanchez here. Raul is our interdisciplinary team leader, and Raul leads a team of 19 Forest Service specialists in various resource areas who have been assigned to this project. Becca Hoffman is our Public Services Staff Officer, and Becca is a land exchange expert, an expert in lands in general, and so she'll be very helpful if you ask difficult land exchange questions. And then we have Ann Thomas, who is our Forest NEPA coordinator. Ann breathes and eats and sleeps NEPA 24/7. So thank you guys very much for coming to help out. Oh, I'm sorry, one more. Carrie Templin is our Public Affairs Officer. And if we have media in attendance, please visit with Carrie. And she'll be glad to visit with you and answer any questions that you may have. So what is NEPA? You hear the term all the time. NEPA stands for the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969. It's the law that requires things like environmental impact statements and environmental assessments. You've likely heard those terms at least. You may be quite knowledgeable about it. NEPA is a formal, structured process to federal decision making. Every federal agency, when we make a decision, we go through some type of NEPA process. NEPA, importantly, requires a federal agency to disclose the effects of our proposed actions. It provides for public involvement in federal decision making, and that's something that we're hoping to really engage throughout this project, not only tonight, but throughout the coming years as we work through this process. It also requires development and analysis of alternatives. You've likely heard of that term if you've been involved in NEPA, but we start with the proposed actions, and we'll also look at alternatives to that action. A few things that NEPA is not. NEPA is not a voting process. It's not a measure of the relative support or opposition to a project. It does not provide a federal agency with any decision-making authority in and of itself. The Forest Service's authority to regulate mining disturbance on Forest Service lands actually comes from the organic land of 1897. And NEPA doesn't overrule other federal laws. It's Forest Service. We have to follow all federal laws and regulations. NEPA, as Ann can attest to, it can be a complex subject, and we would like to just provide you with as much information as we possibly can to help you understand the process. If you like to use the internet to research, there's some great internet resources that talk about NEPA. One is the Council on Environmental Quality website, which is the Council on Environmental Quality is in the Office of the President, and they're the group that actually produces the NEPA regulations that we follow. There's also websites on the Forest Service webpage. We have a number of copies of the Citizen's Guide to the NEPA, which is a great publication, so if you'd rather have something paper to read, we have those over here, and feel free to pick up a copy, and you know, it doesn't have to be that complicated. We have some great people around the room who would love to visit with you about NEPA and help answer any of your questions. By the way, I did forget to introduce some folks here. Let me just step back quickly. We have a number of folks here from SWCA. Can you guys raise your hand, SWCA people? SWCA is an environmental consulting firm who Neil Bosworth, our Forest Supervisor, selected to help the Forest Service with this environmental impact statement process. Neil selected them after a rigorous competitive process, and we're really glad to have them on board. And SWCA is the prime contractor, and then they have a number of subs that we're happy to have on the team because they provide specialized expertise in areas where the Forest Service doesn't have it. For example, tailing storage facilities, underground mining, and a lot of the things that we have to study in this process. So NEPA starts with what's the purpose of the federal action? And you may have asked this to yourself, why is the Forest Service even doing this? And these two paragraphs are out of the Notice of Intent to prepare an environmental impact statement in the Federal Register, which was the formal announcement of the start of the NEPA process. And there's some language in here that I thought was worthwhile to just talk through and explain. In the first paragraph, the purpose of our federal action to consider approval of a proposed plan of operations submitted by Resolution Copper. It's important to remember that this is a proposal that Resolution Copper submitted to the Forest Service. It's not a Forest Service proposal. We're certainly not proposing to construct a tailing storage facility or to build a mine. This is a proposal that they have submitted to us. The second part of the first paragraph to govern surface disturbance on Forest Service lands from mining operations that are reasonably incident to extraction, transportation, and processing of copper and molybdenum. The reason that's important is that means that this project must be regulated in accordance with our regulations for locatable minerals. That's 36 CFR 228 subpart A. And those regulations define the decision framework on the proposed plan of operations. And essentially, those regs say that Neil Bosworth, our Forest Supervisor, may, one, approve the plan of operations as submitted by Resolution Copper, or two, require modifications to that proposal prior to approval. The second paragraph, it's kind of a dual purpose in this case for our proposed federal action to exchange lands between Resolution Copper and the United States as directed by Section 3003 of the National Defense Authorization Act for 2015. That's a federal law which authorizes and directs the land exchange. And so Neil does not have any discretion regarding whether or not those lands will be exchanged. That's something that's set forth by federal law. So in the NEPA process, we start out with the proposed action, and the important thing to think about the proposed action is it's just the starting point for our analysis. So where we're starting this analysis is with a proposed action to approve the proposed plan of operations as submitted by Resolution Copper. and to complete the land exchange as directed by Congress under Section 3003 of the National Defense Authorization Act. In the NEPA process, we're going to start by identifying issues. And we really want your help in helping us to identify issues. And then, once we identify issues, we'll start looking at alternatives. And alternatives must meet the purpose for the action, and they must address the key issues or the significant issues. And so this issues process that we're starting tonight is very important to us. So we'll talk in a bit more detail about the proposed action. If Neil was to approve the proposed plan of operations, it would entail about 4,400 acres of disturbance on Forest Service lands. And that's disturbance in addition to the Oak Flat parcel, which will become private. The primary use of Forest Service land in Resolution's proposal is for tailings disposal. There's other proposed uses for different types of surface infrastructure, such as pipelines, roads, power lines, other surface facilities to support the mine. With respect to the land exchange, as I mentioned, the Oak Flat parcel will become private, as set forth in the federal law. And 8 parcels located elsewhere in Arizona will become federal land. The National Defense Authorization Act has some interesting sections that you should be aware of. As I mentioned, it authorizes and directs the land exchange. So Congress and the President have already made that decision for us. It requires completion of an environmental impact statement prior to exchanging the lands. And that EIS must address both the proposed plan of operations and the land exchange. It mandates a government appraisal of the lands. So an appraisal of the value of the Oak Flat parcel and the other parcels will be conducted. And in the event that the value of the Oak Flat parcel is determined to be more than the other parcels, Resolution Copper must either provide more land or provide a cash payment to the government that would be used to acquire additional Forest Service lands in Arizona or New Mexico. So here's a map of the land exchange parcels. You can see Phoenix and then Superior kind of in the center of the map, Tucson down towards the south. There's several parcels in the Superior area, and the rest are located throughout eastern Arizona. We'll talk briefly about Resolution's proposed mine. We're fortunate that many of you are quite knowledgeable about the mine. We really appreciate your interest in that. They're proposing construction would take about 10 years, with about a 40-year mine life, followed by reclamation. The mine would produce about 25 million tons of copper. To put that number in perspective, in the United States we consume about 1.8 million tons of copper each year. So over that 40-year operational life of the mine, this mine here would produce copper equivalent to about a third of what the U.S. consumes. And of course, we use copper in almost all of our day-to-day activities. It's hard to think of many things that we do from the time the alarm clock goes off in the morning until we shut the lights off to go to sleep that doesn't involve copper. So copper is very important to our daily life. The deposit's very deep, 5,000 to 7,000 feet underground. And they're proposing to mine the deposit using a method called panel caving. Panel caving is a type of block caving. I think the most important thing for you all to know about block caving or panel caving is that it generally leads to subsidence at the surface. Essentially, they'd be mining out an ore body at depth, 5,000 to 7,000 feet, and creating a big void in the earth. If you think of the surface, once that void is created, that surface would collapse in and form a subsidence crater. They're proposing to access the mine with 6 vertical shafts that would be located at their East Plant site, which is up in the Oak Flat area, proposed to be in the Oak Flat area. They would crush the ore underground and then lift it partway to the surface through the shafts. And then they propose to convey that ore through an underground tunnel over to this side in the Superior area. to what they're calling the west plant site, where they would do additional processing. They would use a flotation process, which is similar to many of the copper mines in Arizona. An interesting thing about the proposal is that it would produce no waste rock. If you've driven by Pinto Valley or the other operations in the Globe Miami area, you see the big waste rock dumps where they have the cattle out grazing on their new reclamation. The block cave process does not produce waste rock. Waste rock, for those that don't know, is rock that must be removed to access the ore body, but does not contain enough copper to be ore. The tailings produced at their west plant site would be piped through a pipeline in a slurry, a mixture of tailings and water. And they propose to pipe those tailings out to an area on Mountain National Forest for disposal. They just have a series of maps to kind of show the location. This is the location of the east plant site. So it's up in the Oak Flat area. This would also be the location of the underground mine and the subsidence crater that would form. That ore would be conveyed underground to the west plant site, which is proposed for areas, brownfield areas we call them, areas that were previously impacted by mining from the old magma mine in town. Then it would be piped as a slurry out to the proposed tailings facility, which is proposed to be located between Tweed Valley and Superior. Another part of their proposal is a series of infrastructure located along what they call the Marco corridor. And that is an existing corridor that has a rail track and some pipelines, some other infrastructure. They would use that to pump their copper concentrate down to a filtration plant, which they propose to locate south of Florence Junction. That concentrate would also be pumped as a slurry, a mixture of concentrate, copper concentrate and water. And at the filtration plant, they would squeeze the water out of that concentrate prior to transportation to smelters somewhere in either the U.S. or somewhere in the world where they would do the final process and produce copper metal. So, from the Forest Service's perspective, we want to hear from you. We want to learn from you. And the initial step of this process is called public scoping. The purpose of public scoping is to identify issues for analysis in the environmental impact statement. An issue can be defined as a point of disagreement or dispute or debate about the effects of the proposed action on the environment or on other resources. One thing that's important to remember is that although the Forest Service only has jurisdiction to regulate resolutions of proposed activities on Forest Service land, we have no jurisdiction for private or state land. We will analyze issues and disclose environmental effects to all lands. So that would include the Oak Flat parcel, the private lands in the Superior area, the east plant site, the west plant site, as well as their proposed tailings storage facility. Once we learn the issues from you, we're going to make a big list of the various issues, and then we're going to screen those issues to identify what we call significant issues for analysis in the EIS. And a significant issue is within the scope of the project. It's related to the decision to be made. It's not already decided by law, regulation, or policy, and it's not opinions. And those will be the issues that we'll carry forward and look at in detail in the environmental impact statement. An example of an issue that's already decided by law, regulation, policy is it's a very valid statement or public comment to make that the land should not be exchanged and that land should not be used for mining. And we certainly understand that. We certainly are interested in your comments with respect to that issue, and we will record those comments and put them in the public record. But ultimately, that's something that's already decided by the National Defense Authorization Act of 2015. And so, in terms of the Forest Service's regulatory jurisdiction, that's not what will be a significant issue in the environmental analysis. So I thought to help us as we go through the rest of the meeting tonight, we want to learn from you, that maybe we can talk about some issues that either we've thought about, Raul's team, myself, our SWCA consultants, and also things I've learned from visiting with various folks in the public who have called me. And let's start with significant issues related to subsidence. This is a neat map which SWCA developed. You see Superior in the western part of the map. You see the Apache Leak Cliff. You can see Devil's Canyon over here on this side. And Resolution Copper predicts that their proposed mine would create a subsidence crater 1.5 miles across and 1,000 feet deep at the center. On average, I believe they're predicting the average depth to be about 500 feet. And so, as you can imagine, there's a world of issues related to subsidence. And these are just some of the ones. You know, how would subsidence affect cultural resources at Oak Flat? That's something that Tom mentioned that we certainly recognize. The Forest Service worked with the San Carlos Apache in developing the proposal for the National Park Service to put the Oak Flat traditional cultural property on the National Register of Historic Places. There's a world of cultural issues that we need to study and that we need to disclose in the EIS process. How would subsidence affect surface by a person at the Fort McDowell Yavapai, which I thought was a great comment. And that relates to would subsidence affect Apache Leak. How accurate is that prediction of the bounds of the subsidence area? What's the uncertainty around that prediction? That's something we're going to have to take a very close look at. So we can do the same thing with their proposed tailings storage facility. They're proposing permanent storage, essentially disposal of 1.5 billion tons of tailings at a tailings storage facility located on Forest Service land. It would have a maximum height of about 575 feet, and it would disturb about 7 square miles, so a very large area between Superior and Queen Valley. So what are some of the issues that we need to be looking at with respect to the tailings disposal facility? One issue that I visited with a resident of Queen Valley was, would dust from the tailings affect public health in Queen Valley? Could those tailings have residual quantities of arsenic or cadmium or other trace metals which could affect human health? And could those metals be transported via wind dispersion into area soils or even towards Queen Valley? Would the tailings cause water pollution? Those of us who have worked on large copper mines for years recognize that there certainly are large copper mines with similar tailings facilities that have caused water pollution. So we're absolutely going to have to look at that very closely in EIS. Similar to the Oak Flat area, would the tailings facility destroy cultural resources? Are there sensitive and important cultural resources and sacred sites in the area of the proposed tailings facility that could be buried or obliterated by the facility? And one thing that we think about in the Forest Service, there's been folks like my colleagues here in Forest Service uniforms working around this area since 1905, when the National Forest first started. We take a very long-term look at environmental issues and forest management issues. And if we think 100 years from now, what would be any lingering effects of that tailings storage facility? Would there be long-term water quality issues, long-term environmental liabilities related to facility stability, erosion? There's a world of long-term issues that we really need to look at closely. And certainly, we need to look at socioeconomic issues as well. How would the project affect employment opportunities in Superior? How would the project affect state and local tax revenue? How would the project affect local school systems or other public services here in Superior or in neighboring communities? And one thing that we need to look at is how would the project affect total economic activity in the region, in the Superior area? Because primary industries like copper mining, agriculture, when they generate wealth through the creation, in this case of copper, they end up essentially purchasing labor from households. Money is transferred to households, which in turn spend that money. There would be various service firms providing services to the mine. And so there's a larger overall economic activity that would be generated by the mine than just the direct profits made by the mining company. And that's something that is referred to as economic multipliers. So we'll be looking closely at socioeconomic effects of the mine and working through that and making sure we disclose that. So a couple of final slides about comments. As Tom mentioned, we really want to listen to you and your concerns. We've been working on this for a couple of years now, and I think Raul and I are about blue in the face visiting with each other about potential issues, and we can't do it ourselves. We really need this broad base of public support through our public involvement process. So comments are most helpful when they are solution-oriented. Provide examples. An example comment here, the EIS should consider the potential for acid rock drainage to leak into underground aquifers and to contaminate springs and other water sources downstream from Oak Flat. That's an example of a comment we could really work with. We can develop that into a key issue. We can get our expert geochemists studying that and our water quality specialists and try and address that issue. Oops. I can go back. Comments are less helpful when they simply express a personal opinion. And we're absolutely willing to listen. We do hear what you think, but ultimately we have to act within the bounds of our authority. The Forest Service has to follow federal laws and regulations and policies. So an example of a comment that may be very, very honest and very forthright and open. Mining is terribly destructive. Mining should not be allowed on any forest lands. While we'll accept those comments and put them into the record, that's really not a comment that's going to help us do much analysis in the EIS, or that would lead to alternatives that we can develop to try and address issues, because that's something that's just beyond our regulatory jurisdiction. So there are many ways to submit comments. If you want to submit verbal comments, we have a court reporter, I believe, out in the lobby. We're glad to take your verbal comments. Oh, sorry. Doesn't get much easier than that. We have comment forms, and you can drop them off in the comment box. We have a number of ways you can submit them by voicemail or fax or email. Submit them to our website. Feel free to ask any of the folks from the Forest Service or SWCA for additional help how to provide comments. We really appreciate your help in the project. So with that, Marty is going to lead us into our question and answer session.